name is Jordan Garo. I'm presenting my second book report on Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. Um, I really enjoyed the autobiographical approach that Dr. Ariely took to the subject. He has a fascinating and tragic history, suffering from third-degree burns over 70% of his body from an explosion while he was still in high school. He spent 3 years in the hospital, enduring many surgeries. And I believe this experience shaped his outlook and gave him a unique perspective on human behavior. And his career and research that he has conducted is presented in this book. So one of Dr. Ariely's central points is that people are collectively irrational in predictable ways, as opposed to the traditional economic theory that people are rational agents and they'll always make choices that are in their best interest. So this predictability can have both positive and negative consequences. Specifically, knowledge of these failings in judgment can be used to take advantage of people, or it can be used to empower them to make better decisions. So I'll discuss a few of the irrational ways in which we behave that Dr. Ariely discusses in this book. The first is the relativity of options. So in this experiment, he took two pictures of undergrads, one of Tom, one of Jerry in this example, and he used one portrait and warped it a little, deformed it a little. And what he was trying to do was test his theory on comparing options that are like and that are different. So it's easier to compare two like options versus two different options. For example, when confronted with three options, two of which are similar, one being objectively better than the other, the third option is usually ignored in favor of the better of the like options, regardless whether the third option's better or not. And he conducted it with this experiment with Tom and Jerry. When he asked test subjects about the first row of portraits who they thought was more attractive, invariably people chose Jerry, while about the same percentage in a separate experiment chose Tom when they were confronted with the bottom row of subjects. So it's not whether there's not an objectively one's not objectively more attractive than the other, but comparing it to a similar but warped face allowed the people to make an easier judgment because Tom, the left Tom, is much more attractive than the middle Tom in the bottom row. So it's more of a failing of cognition based on just the ease of having to make that decision. The next experiment is on arbitrary coherence, which is also, he also talks about anchoring, the anchoring effect. So once a price is established in our minds, it has an overweight effect on subsequent decisions. And to demonstrate this effect, Dr. Ariely described the case of the Tahitian black pearls. Black pearls at one time were pretty uncommon, and there wasn't really a market for them. Nobody knew what to charge for them. And Salvador Asel, who was considered the pearl king of the world, he tried marketing them for a while, but was not having much luck. And then he managed to get the pearls displayed in a window in a Fifth Avenue, New York City jewelry store with an obscene price tag. And this established a pricing value in the public's mind from then on. And black pearls today are perceived to have this high value. And this same effect can be seen in more arbitrary ways, establishing that anchoring point. So Dr. Ariely conducted this experiment with grad students where he asked them to write down the last two digits of their social security number. And then he asked them to bid on various objects, in this case, a bottle of wine. And the students with the lower last two digits of their social security number invariably bid less than the students with a higher last two digits of their social security number. And before being presented with this information, he asked the students whether they thought that their social security numbers had any bearing on their bids, and they all said no. But obviously, the results say otherwise. The next concept is the influence of arousal. So sex sells, but it also makes you more risk-seeking. And he demonstrated this with this experiment with undergrad males. He asked them a series of questions in a unaroused state, in an aroused state, in a private aroused state. They were asked, here's an example of some of the questions. So are women's shoes erotic, blah, blah, blah. Can you imagine, or could it be fun to have sex with somebody who is extremely fat? In the non-aroused state versus the aroused state, and you can see the difference percentage on the right. People invariably have stronger feelings towards these questions in a positive way when they're in an aroused state. And it's not just sexual arousal that causes these influences on behavior, but it also could be anger, desperation, hunger, anything that causes a strain on our willpower. Because when our willpower gets depleted, we're more susceptible to make changes against our long-term well-being, and more likely to make more short-term thinking decisions. Another concept is the effect of expectations. So expecting an outcome can influence our experience of that outcome. And as a corollary, not expecting something can have a similar effect. And Dr. Arley described an experiment whereby subjects are offered 2 unlabeled beers. Both were the same brand, except one had a small amount of balsamic vinaigrette. When subjects were given a blind taste test, more preferred the vinegar concoction. However, if prompted before the test with the information that one actually contained the balsamic vinegar, subjects were more likely to taste the vinegar and dislike that vinegar-laced beer. However, when prompted after the test and they were told that the beer that they liked had vinegar in it, they responded similarly to the blind taste test. So their taste didn't change with information after the fact, only before the fact. And the next subject is the cost of zero or free. So free and zero are very powerful words that have a strong effect on our decision making. So when confronted with consumer choices, people will tend to choose the option that comes with a free offer or zero-based offer. One example would be a 0% intro rate on a credit card. And many people will be drawn to that offer without considering after the intro rate runs out, what would that interest rate be? Are there any annual fees, additional fees? So the longer term cost of the zero rate offer is likely to be worse than other seemingly less attractive offers. And Dr. Arley demonstrated that even short-term objective gains are blinded by this free choice offer. In one study, he offered students 3 Hershey's Kisses and stated he would trade 1 kiss for a small Snickers or 2 kisses for a large Snickers. And the large Snickers and the small Snickers were much bigger than the kisses, so that's an objectively better option if you can trade up to the Snickers bar. However, when students were given the choice between a free small Snickers or a free small Snickers for nothing, or trading 1 kiss for a larger Snickers, they overwhelmingly chose the free option. Even though if they traded 1 kiss for a large Snickers, they're gaining much more chocolate and a much larger snack. But somehow, the free option was given a greater value in their minds despite this objectively better option. Another subject that he discussed in his book is this idea of keeping doors open, keeping options open, essentially. We have a tendency to keep options open and fear the idea of reducing options. However, this attitude may not be in our best interest. And Dr. Arley demonstrated how keeping options open can be irrational with this experiment where he had students click on these 3 doors. This is an example of the experiment that he actually performed. So there's 3 doors. Each door gives you a specific score. So you click on a door. Door 1 could be 10 points. Door 2 could be 15. Door 3 could be 20. You won't know until you actually click on the door. And you want to maximize your score. So you want to click on the door with the highest amount of points continuously. And when the doors were all the same size and nothing changed on the doors, students normally maximize their best score by choosing the door that had the highest points. However, when they changed the test, and if you didn't click on a door for 12 clicks, it would actually disappear. And in the meantime, it would start reducing, so you could actually see it disappearing. And so invariably, students would actually go and click on the doors with the less points in order to keep them open. Instead of trying to maximize their score, they irrationally chose to keep these doors open. And this has something to do with loss aversion. However, it's not an aversion to a monetary loss, but more of an aversion to options or potential opportunity. And the last subject that I'll discuss from Dr. Arley's book is the social versus market mores, or social versus market behaviors. So social norms, this is an example of if a friend asks you to help move some furniture, and in return he'll buy you a six-pack. Or if that same friend says, could you help me move some furniture? I'll give you $10. Most people will feel better about getting the six-pack than the $10. Something about valuing that favor in monetary terms changes the interaction. And even though, say, the six-pack and the $10 are of equal value, and rationally they should be thought of as the same, the social norms kind of outweigh the market norms in this circumstance, and changes how we perceive that. So Dr. Arley performed this experiment where he asked students to drag these circles on the screen, just drag them from one side of the screen to the other and just drop them in this box. For 5 minutes, he asked them to just take a circle and just drag it. Some students he charged $5 for this task. Some students he charged 50 cents for this task. Well, not charged, he paid them $5 or 50 cents. And then the last group, he actually asked them to perform this task as a favor. So when everything was tallied up, as you can imagine, the students who received more money performed better, meaning that they put more circles into the box than the students who were paid 50 cents for the task. However, the students who weren't paid anything, the students who were asked to do this as a favor, actually performed better or put in more effort than the other two, than the $5 group and the 50 cents group. So somehow we value providing these favors and these social norms as more valuable than market norms. And he also warned about mixing social and market norms. And this other research that he did, there was a study of this daycare that had this late pickup policy. And they started charging parents late fees if they were late in picking up their children. Previously, parents would try to get there on time and feel guilty if they didn't. However, once they started charging people, the parents stopped caring. They figured they'd just pay the fine, and it made the problem worse. But when they tried to revert that policy and they took away the fee, they had already set this precedent of, this market precedent rather than the social precedent of feeling guilty for being late. And parents no longer had that sense of guilt. So you can't really walk that back. So it's a very, very bad idea to mix market norms with social norms, especially when you're starting from a social relationship. And so I really enjoyed Dr. Arley's book, and I believe it offers a very, very good lesson, understanding how people how people can make these decisions kind of against their own interest, and understanding how it happens, we're able to avoid these situations and make more rational decisions. So thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.